at precisely 1400 hours on a Tuesday afternoon in the South China Sea. Radar operator second-class petty officer Marcus Chen detected something that made his pulse spike. 6 contacts inbound, fast. The USS Gerald R. Ford, America's newest and most powerful aircraft carrier, was about to be tested in ways the public would never hear about. What you're about to witness is not just the story of a tense aerial intercept. This is the story of what happens in the 73 minutes when a $10 billion carrier strike group responds to aggression, the maneuvers you've never seen, the decisions that never made headlines, and the protocols that keep us one step away from war. To understand what happened that day, you need to understand where it happened. The South China Sea is not just water. It is one of the most strategically valuable and politically explosive regions on Earth. Through these waters flows 30% of global maritime trade, over $5 trillion in goods every single year. China claims almost the entire sea, building artificial islands and militarizing them with radar systems, missile batteries, and airfields. The United States, along with its regional allies, rejects these claims. American carriers regularly conduct what the Navy calls freedom of navigation operations, a diplomatic phrase for a very clear message. These are international waters, and we will sail where international law permits. The USS Gerald R. Ford is not just a ship. At over 100,000 tons and stretching longer than 3 football fields, this floating fortress represents the pinnacle of American military engineering. But the carrier never travels alone. A carrier strike group is a coordinated fleet. The carrier itself, 2 guided missile cruisers bristling with Aegis combat systems, 4 destroyers, a fast attack submarine lurking beneath the surface, and a supply ship. Together, they form what military strategists call a bubble of dominance, a moving zone of air, surface, and subsurface superiority spanning hundreds of miles. On this particular deployment, the Ford Strike Group was conducting routine operations. But in these waters, routine is a relative term, because China was watching, and China was ready to respond. Inside the Ford's Combat Direction Center, the heart of the carrier's nervous system, the atmosphere is controlled intensity. Banks of radar screens track hundreds of contacts simultaneously. Civilian aircraft, commercial shipping, military vessels from multiple nations. The Air Warfare Commander, a seasoned officer who has managed this chaos for 22 years, monitors it all. Then Marcus Chen's voice cuts through the low murmur of radio chatter. "Sir, I have multiple airborne contacts bearing 270, range 100 nautical miles, speed 400 knots. Classification pending. 100 nautical miles. That gives them approximately 15 minutes before those contacts reach the carrier group's defensive perimeter. The Air Warfare Commander's response is immediate and calm. Launch alert fighters. Bring defense condition to 2. Notify the Admiral." Within 90 seconds, 2 FA-18 Super Hornets are screaming down the Ford's electromagnetic catapults at 165 miles per hour in under 3 seconds. The G-force slams the pilots back into their seats, a violence they've trained for thousands of times but never quite get used to. The lead pilot, callsign Hammer, banks hard to the west, his wingman Viper tucked in tight. Their mission is clear: intercept, identify, and document. But they both know the unspoken reality. They are also a warning, a message written in jet fuel and thrust. As Hammer and Viper climb through 20,000 feet, the radar picture becomes clearer. 6 Chinese J-11 fighters, derivatives of the Russian Sukhoi Su-27, are flying in combat formation directly toward the carrier group. This is not a navigation error. This is deliberate, and the unseen maneuvers are about to begin. What happens next is invisible to satellites, unreported by media, and misunderstood by most observers. When the public hears intercept, they imagine 2 jets meeting in the sky. But a carrier strike group response is a multi-dimensional operation involving coordination across air, surface, and subsurface domains simultaneously. While Hammer and Viper race to meet the Chinese fighters, the Ford's air wing launches a second response layer, 2 E-2D advanced Hawkeye aircraft. The group's eyes in the sky take off to establish an aerial command post. These unglamorous propeller-driven aircraft carry the most sophisticated radar and communication systems in the Navy's inventory. From their position at 25,000 feet, The Hawkeyes can track every aircraft within a 300-mile radius and coordinate fighter movements across the battle space. They become the chess players, while the fighters are the pieces. But the real genius of the Carrier Strike Group response happens on the surface. The USS Lake Erie, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser positioned 70 miles ahead of the carrier, quietly activates its SEP-Y1 radar to full power. This phased array system can track over 300 targets simultaneously while guiding dozens of missiles. The cruiser's vertical launch cells, loaded with SM-2 and SM-6 air defense missiles, are now in a heightened state of readiness. The destroyers USS Michael Murphy and USS John Finn maneuver to create overlapping fields of fire, establishing what tacticians call mutually supporting positions. If those Chinese fighters turned hostile, they would have to penetrate multiple layers of defense, each capable of engaging at different ranges. And beneath the waves, unseen and unheard, the Virginia-class submarine attached to the strike group moves into position. While surface ships track air contacts, the submarine monitors for any Chinese naval vessels that might be coordinating with the aircraft. In modern naval warfare, threats are three-dimensional. The Air Warfare Commander watches his screen. The Chinese fighters are now 60 miles out. Still coming, still on an intercept course. He makes a decision that will cascade through the entire strike group. Execute Sierra 7. Sierra 7 is not a weapons protocol. It is a maneuver package, a pre-planned series of movements designed to demonstrate capability without escalation. The carrier alters course 15 degrees. The escorts shift formation, opening lanes of fire while maintaining defensive spacing. Two more Super Hornets launch from the forward's deck, bringing the airborne fighter count to 4. Every move is calculated. Every position is deliberate. The message being sent is unmistakable. We see you, we are ready, and we control this battle space. At 40-mile separation, Hammer gets his first visual on the Chinese formation. 6 J-11s in a tactical spread, their gray camouflage stark against the blue sky. His heartbeat is steady, training overrides adrenaline. But he knows this is a moment where mistakes have consequences measured in lives and international incidents. Viper, stay with me. We're going beak to beak. Beak to beak is naval aviator terminology for a head-on approach. It is simultaneously a defensive posture and a psychological tactic. Flying directly at an incoming contact forces them to make a decision: turn away or commit to a game of chicken at closing speeds exceeding 1,000 miles per hour. The Chinese lead aircraft does not turn. He holds course. At 5 miles, Hammer can see the weapons pylons on the Chinese jets. They are armed, likely with PL-12 air-to-air missiles and PL-8 short-range weapons. He performs a visual threat assessment in seconds. Weapons configuration, air superiority, pilot behavior, professional, intent, still unclear. 3 miles, the radio crackles. A heavily accented voice in English. United States Navy aircraft. You are approaching Chinese territorial waters. Alter your course. Hammer's response is textbook, calm, professional, firm, negative. This is United States Navy aircraft operating in international airspace consistent with international law. We are on a lawful mission. 2 miles. The Chinese fighter is now visible in exquisite detail. Hammer can see the pilot's helmet, the squadron markings, the vapor trail streaming from the wingtips. Then, in a moment that lasts 3 seconds but feels like 3 minutes, they pass. The Chinese lead fighter rolls inverted as he crosses above Hammer's canopy, close enough that the wake turbulence rattles Hammer's aircraft. It is a maneuver designed to intimidate, but it is also a signal. The Chinese pilot is showing his skill, his confidence, and his willingness to operate at the edge of safety margins. What follows is a carefully choreographed aerial ballet. The Chinese fighters circle, probing for weaknesses in the American formation. The Super Hornets maintain position, matching every turn, every altitude change. Neither side locks weapons radar. Neither side issues explicit threats. But every maneuver is communication. Every position is statement. This continues for 43 minutes. 43 minutes where one pilot error, one equipment malfunction, one misinterpreted radio call could trigger an international crisis. And throughout it all, the Carrier Strike Group continues its unseen response. While the world's attention would focus on the aerial drama, The real story is happening in the coordination between every element of the strike group. This is where decades of training, millions of hours of exercise time, and billions in integrated technology come together. The E-2D Hawkeye is managing fuel states for all airborne fighters, calculating time on station, and coordinating a continuous cycle of launches and recoveries from the forward's deck. 2 fighters are always in position to intercept, 2 are always in reserve, and 2 are always preparing to launch. On the forward's flight deck, the organized chaos is actually a precision choreography. Aircraft handlers in their color-coded jerseys move fighters into position. Ordnance teams stand ready. Fuel crews prepare hoses. The deck is divided into zones, launch areas, parking zones, and the recovery section aft where jets will land. Every person knows that the carrier's ability to sustain flight operations is its core capability. Lose that, and the entire strike group loses its primary weapon. The forward uses electromagnetic catapults instead of steam, a revolutionary technology that allows higher launch rates with less stress on aircraft. During this incident, the carrier maintains what is called cyclic operations, launching and recovering aircraft every 90 seconds when necessary. But there is another layer of response that few understand. The forward's electronic warfare suite is constantly active. EA-18G Growler aircraft from the Air Wing are airborne, carrying pods that can detect, analyze, and if necessary, jam radar and communication signals. They are mapping the Chinese fighters' radar systems, recording frequencies, analyzing tactics. This intelligence collection is as important as the physical intercept. Every Chinese maneuver is recorded, every radio frequency is cataloged, every tactic is analyzed. This data will be reviewed by intelligence analysts aboard the carrier, then transmitted via satellite to Pacific Fleet headquarters, then to the Pentagon. The Chinese pilots know they are being watched. The American pilots know they are being watched. And both sides know that this encounter is as much about gathering intelligence as it is about asserting presence. Meanwhile, the Virginia-class submarine maintains its silent vigil. Using passive sonar, the sub detects a Chinese Type 052D destroyer operating 70 miles to the northwest. The Chinese surface combatant is likely coordinating with their fighters, providing an additional radar picture. The submarine logs the contact, updates its tactical picture, and continues monitoring. Its presence is unknown to the Chinese, but its value is incalculable. It provides the strike group commander with complete situational awareness of all surface and subsurface contacts. In the forward's flag spaces, the strike group commander, a 2-star admiral with 30 years of experience, monitors the situation. His staff provides updates every 3 minutes. Fuel states, weapon status, political guidance from higher command. He has multiple options available. He could launch additional aircraft, demonstrating escalatory capability. He could maneuver the carrier into a more defensive posture. He could request support from land-based maritime patrol aircraft. He chooses to hold position. The message is clear. We are not intimidated, we are not leaving, and we are prepared for any contingency. This decision, made calmly in a climate-controlled command center, is the definition of modern naval power. At the 1 hour and 13-minute mark, the Chinese fighters break off. It is not a retreat. It is a tactical decision. They have made their point. They have tested American responses, gathered intelligence, and demonstrated their capability to operate in this region. The lead Chinese pilot rocks his wings, an international signal, and turns northeast toward Hainan Island. His wingmen follow in sequence, the formation dissolving as they separate for their return flight. Hammer watches them go. He maintains his position for another 10 minutes, ensuring the Chinese fighters are truly departing and not executing a feint. Only when they cross 200 nautical miles and begin their descent does he receive clearance to return to the carrier. Forward Tower, Hammer, and Viper request approach and landing. Hammer, Forward Tower, cleared for approach. Winds at 10 knots, deck clear. The landing is perhaps the most dangerous moment of the entire flight. Carrier landings require pilots to fly in a controlled descent onto a moving ship, snagging an arresting wire with a tail hook at exactly the right moment. Margin for error is measured in feet and fractions of seconds. Hammer traps perfectly, the arresting wire bringing his 20-ton fighter from 140 miles per hour to 0 in under 3 seconds. The deceleration force is immense, but he has done this hundreds of times. He taxis out of the landing area and Viper follows 30 seconds later. As Hammer climbs down from his cockpit, he is immediately met by intelligence officers. They need his observations. What did he see? How did the Chinese pilots fly? Were there any communication anomalies? Every detail matters. Across the strike group, defense conditions return to normal readiness. The cruisers and destroyers resume their standard formation. The submarine continues its patrol below. Additional fighters remain on standby, but the heightened alert status is lowered. The incident that consumed 73 minutes of high-tension operations is over. No shots were fired, no threats were issued. No international laws were violated by either side. To the outside world, it appears as though nothing happened. But to the 7,500 personnel aboard the Ford Strike Group, it was a successful demonstration of training, capability, and resolve. This incident in the South China Sea is not isolated. It is one of dozens that occur every year as American carrier strike groups operate in contested regions around the world. The Pacific Fleet alone conducts over 200 freedom of navigation operations annually, each carrying the potential for similar encounters. But what makes these encounters significant goes far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Every interaction between American and Chinese military forces is carefully analyzed by defense ministries in allied nations throughout the Indo-Pacific region. Japan, South Korea, Australia, the Philippines, Taiwan, all of these nations watch these encounters to gauge American commitment and resolve. When a carrier strike group maintains its course despite aggressive intercepts, it sends a message that resonates far beyond the immediate location. It demonstrates that freedom of navigation is not merely a principle but a practice backed by capability and will. The intelligence collected during these encounters provides invaluable data. Analysts study Chinese fighter tactics, communication procedures, and coordination methods. This information feeds into planning assumptions, training scenarios, and operational doctrines. Similarly, Chinese military observers analyze American responses. They assess reaction times, coordination effectiveness, and decision-making patterns. This mutual observation creates what strategists call transparency through presence. Both sides understand each other's capabilities, reducing the risk of miscalculation. The crew of the USS Gerald R. Ford will continue their deployment for another 4 months. They will conduct more exercises, more operations, and likely more intercepts. For them, this is the reality of forward-deployed naval power in the 21st century. These are not distant abstractions or geopolitical theories. These are 19-year-old radar operators tracking contacts, 25-year-old pilots in cockpits, 38-year-old chiefs maintaining equipment, 47-year-old commanders making decisions. They train for years to perform at this level. They operate equipment representing decades of technological development and billions in investment. And they execute their missions with a professionalism that prevents incidents from becoming crises. The unseen maneuvers during these encounters, the coordinated responses, the layered defenses, the precise communications, represent the culmination of American naval power, developed over 75 years since the end of World War II. Critics question whether carrier strike groups remain relevant in an era of hypersonic missiles and advanced satellites. But days like this demonstrate why carriers continue to serve as the primary instrument of American power projection. They provide presence, capability, flexibility, and most importantly, options. Hours after the incident, the Ford's Combat Direction Center has returned to routine watch operations. New operators have relieved those who managed the intercept. The watch continues, as it does every hour of every day when carrier strike groups are deployed. And somewhere else in the Pacific, another carrier group is preparing for its own potential encounter. The cycle continues. The story of what happened when Chinese fighters intercepted the USS Gerald R. Ford Strike Group is ultimately a story about the invisible architecture of modern military power. It is not about dramatic confrontations or movie-style dogfights. It is about coordination, preparation, and the disciplined application of capability. These unseen maneuvers happen because thousands of personnel trained relentlessly for scenarios they hope never to face. They happen because commanders study history and tactics, always refining responses. They happen because engineers design systems that work seamlessly together across multiple platforms. And an era where headlines focus on the dramatic and immediate. It is worth understanding the sophisticated reality beneath the surface. When you hear about an intercept incident in the South China Sea, remember that what you are hearing is the smallest visible part of a much larger coordinated response. The 73 minutes of that Tuesday afternoon represent countless hours of training, decades of doctrine development, and generations of naval tradition. They represent the reason why carrier strike groups remain the ultimate expression of naval power, not because they are perfect or invincible, but because they bring together technology, training, and human judgment in a way that no other military system can match. The next time you see news of a tense encounter between American and Chinese forces, remember the unseen maneuvers, remember the coordination, remember the professionalism, and remember that behind every headline is a story far more complex and far more impressive than most realize. This has been the untold story of modern naval power at the edge of conflict. Until next time.